Hi, everybody. I am Debbie Davis, and I'm an alcoholic. And I want to display some good manners here, which you showed me how to do. And that is, I do want to thank Bob for the invitation. It does always feel like such an honor to me to be invited to Stateline, whatever I'm asked to do. I want to thank Marnie for really being that hostess with the mostest, making sure every nook and cranny is filled with goodies and all kinds of things. Roshana for picking us up twice at the airport, once for Kent and once for me because I had forgotten some very important pieces of luggage. The kind that have your hair and makeup stuff in. You can buy clothes, but this stuff is, we don't travel without it, and yet apparently I was going to do that. And I want to thank Jennifer for being a great hostess here on the ground, carrying us off to the movies, which is a great thing for me. That's always one of my favorite pastimes. And so thank you, Stateline. Getting to be here with so many people I know, friends, the speakers I've heard so far, I mean, just beyond, just boom. I don't know about you, but it's really, whenever I come to this, it's always buckle up because you were in for a heck of a ride. Between the saturation of their experience, strength, and hope. And we kick it off with Bill doing his story, which is always cracks me up about being the bad motorcycle guy with the clip-on earring. I love that part. That is so good. Don, I'm so grateful Don showed up because I was his backup. I'm glad he showed up because I was just Miss Bobblehead in the audience, agreeing with what he was sharing about home group and membership and our unity and the importance that every one of us in this room has regarding the experience people have coming to our home group. Every one of us is responsible for that experience of the new person. And then Billy always makes me think about our history. He always just really makes me expand about thoughts about Alcoholics Anonymous and our history. And then kicking it off with the first step we had Kathy. And Kathy, you mentioned the 4 M's. And I wrote them down. They were mothering, managing, martyrdom, and manipulations. I would not be guilty of 3 of those. Manipulations, perhaps. But I have my own 4 M's. Men, money, mansions, and mine. Those are my 4 M's. So we're kind of on different tracks there on that. But I love to listen to the Al-Anon speakers. They are a real gift because it always reminds me what I put my father through. I don't come from alcoholism. I was the alcoholism in that family, and it reminds me always what I put my dad through. And then we got to hear about step 1 with Don, and the sheer terror and honesty of sharing up here, but also this is where everyone in this room begins is with step 1. Step 0 going into step 1. And then my sponsor, Marilyn, on step 2 makes us laugh and cry. And, I realize that Bob and I are like litter mates because we both are sponsored by Marilyn. And my husband is sponsored by Bob, which means I'm married to my nephew. That's kind of creepy, I know, but, luckily it's not legally my nephew, and I do want to thank Kent for joining me this weekend. It appears he's trying to out-glitterazzi me. He can keep trying. I don't think too many women have had that problem. I didn't think I would ever have that problem. But I will win. I will win. And then Matthew this morning, kapow on the beauty. I watched God just coming through that man today. And it just really struck my heart. And Ralph, the first time I heard Ralph do the resentment section of the inventory, it changed the way I started passing on the experience of the inventory and for myself. So I appreciate Ralph in that experience. And Mike, with fear and sex, I mean, I'm glad it wasn't me that he asked to talk on that. We would never have a section on the sex conduct if the book had been written by me. But as the result of that section, I wrote an ideals list, and that's when I stopped selling out. That's when I stopped settling for chips and dip and waited for the banquet to arrive in my life, which I have been married to Kent for over 23 years. And I am so grateful, but that ideals list clarified that for me. So our speakers have brought us up 1 through 4, and the actions they've taken and the experiences they've had. And I get 5, 6, and 7. And I have 1 hour, so we're going to be brief about it to a degree. But so 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Many times I've heard on the inventory, don't forget to write your assets down. I'm not here to comment except that I never got in trouble for my assets. I never embarrassed myself because of my assets. But I really created so much pain and discomfort and harm in my life because of the things I did wrong and under the influence that also played out in my defects of character. And so my experience with a 5th step, my first one, I was in a treatment program. My sobriety date, by the way, is February 8, 1976, which means I've been with you for over 48 years. I'm not the longest one sober in the room, of course, but I want to welcome those who are in their first year to a way of life. And I want to welcome the other newcomers like Bob and like Don and many of the people on the program here today. And so my first 5th step, I was shown the book. It wasn't explained. I was given this lengthy 120-some question Hazelden booklet. I felt it was trick questions. They were trying to make you say things you didn't want to say. And so I did what was my life story. Good enough. And I told a man that inventory. And the benefit I got was it broke the ice. It wasn't the way I would do it today. It's not the way I guide people to do it. But it broke the ice of the fearful boogeyman of the inventory. Good enough. The second inventory is when I was about 6+ years sober. I came crashing into AA. I had never left you physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, I was bankrupt. And I came back into AA, and I was ready to recommit myself to Alcoholics Anonymous, which I did. And in the process of going through the steps again, as if I had never taken them before, I went and did this inventory. And it was the shortest one as far as length of writing, but it was the most, I knew I had cleaned the bottom of my barrel, if you know what I'm saying. I knew I had gotten down to the icky, the nitty, the gritty, the stuff that you're ashamed of. And this wasn't just drinking experience. This was sober experience that was shameful, that was more embarrassing than I'd ever done drinking. I could say then, oh, I was drunk. I couldn't do that or excuse what I had been doing at this time. And so that was the next time I gave an inventory, told a fifth step. And then I did a couple more. I did one with Marilyn a few years ago. And the bonus is that you find out how ununique you are, how tiny I was. I was no big deal. Nothing I had done or experienced or thought or felt hadn't been done, thought, experienced before. And many times we'll hear a sponsor say that, they took notes for me. I take notes for myself when I listen to your inventory, just to know who the players are and, what their names are, what's their relationship to you. But I've gotten the pleasure to hear a lot of fifth steps, and I take that very, very seriously. And I give it with intention. We have that quiet time. It's allotted 2 to 4 hours. It just depends on, kind of what I'm gauging. We start off with reading out of chapter 6 into action, and boy, is that chapter into action. There's 7 steps covered in that chapter. And we get up to that part where it says, we pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. And we stop there and we begin the process of listening. And I'll say, look, there isn't an 8th deadly sin that you've created, okay? There isn't anything new that you're going to tell me that I haven't already heard, thought, or done myself. There isn't anything for you to be afraid to tell me. And over the next period of time, I'll maybe share a little bit there and they'll share back, and just begin that, try to make that comfortable. And then after it's all over, Is there anything else? And oftentimes there's no, which means yes. I know enough. I'm not a psychic, but I know enough fifth steps where there's something else. And I'll say, well, just in case there is, feel free to let me know when you're ready. And usually within 48 hours, that phone rings. There was that one thing. Would you like to tell me now? Sure. Blah, 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 blah. And, in almost every case so far, I figured I knew what that was anyway. And I said, do you feel better now? You can almost feel through the phone the release, the exhale of that. And so with this, I have now, I've certainly heard many people say they had the fire pit where they threw it in and had a big ceremony of the getting rid of the inventory. Let me just caution you, don't do that quite yet. You're going to need that for the next 4 steps. Then you can do whatever you want with it. But in the meantime, while it might be very dramatic and theatrical, hold off just a minute. And so in step 5, there's the 12 and 12, and I love the 12 and 12 because it has the maturity of it, and it clarifies a lot of things that the big book, was only the experience of their 3 and 4 years of sobriety. And while excellent, and I just love the 12 and 12 to continue on with that. And in there it said, we cannot live alone with our pressing problems and the character defects which cause or aggravate them. So next off, I'm on to step 6, which connects to 7. Well, after that, we read the rest of the step, and we take that time. It even gives us a real good guideline. We have some 5th step promises we refer to in there, and then we take that 1 hour. It gives us real clear direction what we do. Take the book off the shelf, take an hour, go back through the first 5 proposals. Have you omitted anything? And the way how I look at that is that when I started with step 1, I was like facing this way. At step 5, I'm facing right here, right now. I'm about to go forward at this point, and I don't want to be dragging any garbage or unneeded stuff, any forgotten things, any intentionally omitted things into this new way of living. So it gives us that opportunity to one more time look at that. Have I tried to make mortar without sand? And then it goes on to the rest of the next step. And as Jennifer read, if we can answer to our satisfaction, and those are the questions from the 5th step, we then look at step 6. We've emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? What is my definition of objectionable? Well, in the dictionary, it's undesirable or offensive. And I look at my objectionables as what are the things that I do or behaviors of mine that cause harm to me and or other people. And the way that I do step 6 is a little different because I am an action item girl. When I first looked at step 6 and 7, I could just skip rope over those. They were and then onto the list, right? Didn't seem like there was much to them. It doesn't tell you, well, God's going to do everything okay. Just sit on the couch and let her rip. I don't know what we're supposed to do. There's only one paragraph each in the big book, so it really was oh, well, okay, move on. But boy, there's a whole lot of action that I am to participate in when I read step 6 and 7 in the 12 and 12. So the way I do step 6 and 7 is that I take a piece of paper, put a line down the middle. I title the left side step 6, the right side step 7. And just as a side note here, a few years ago I had the pleasure of speaking here on the traditions in my life, how I use them personally. And in tradition 10, outside issues are to remain outside, that we have no opinion on outside issues. And we were married about 2 years, coming back from Yosemite, which is about a 4-hour drive. And I had been asked to share at a weekend retreat about how I apply the traditions in my marriage. And so I said, well, I really feel like we do that. But, let's just put the words to it. So on the way back, we're going through each of the traditions, and I'm making notes. And we get to 10, and it's almost like Kent was waiting for this one. And having outside issues that they have no opinion on them, he just automatically what came out of his mouth was that you have to consider your husband's defects of character as outside issues and therefore have no opinion on them. What? How will you know about them, right? Who will help you with those? And of course, the more I thought about it, I felt like I'd been put in a straitjacket and muzzled. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, that's really right. Why is it I put his defects under the microscope in a nanosecond instead of the many assets he has? And so I followed it up with, so he has a couple of really big ones, and I've got a bunch of little ones. And I just thought that was fair, I figure if you stack up all my little ones, they would equal the big ones. So we get home, and he said, you know how you said when I had a couple of big ones and you had a lot of little ones? Yeah. He says, well, have you ever heard of the disease of perception? What? Yeah. So you're saying I have a couple big ones and you have a bunch of little ones? He says, like I said, the disease of perception. But I have the microphone. So I will not review his defects of character today. I will review my many little ones. But it is a really good point for me to be reminded of. There are many questions. What's the difference between defects of character and shortcomings? I don't know. Who cares? You got them. Just know you got them. You know, there's the question that Bill said he didn't want to duplicate the same words. I don't know. I think it's important, just know you have them. And so what's a defect? It's an imperfection. What is character? It's moral or ethical quality. I had zero character in coming into here. I have learned through you and your actions about character building. But first I needed to take a look at what were these defects of mine? What were my objectionables? And so I get to let you in behind the curtain of my life. What are my objectionables? You might have already seen them, but I'm going to tell you what I've written down on my list. The number one objectionable is self-righteousness. That they've diminished, but they haven't completely gone away. They're just below the skin for me. And if I'm not feeling well, or some of these other defects of character have been activated, those babies come right out ready. They're like a submarine eye. They're looking to go. Self-righteousness. So I write that down. Smugly moralistic. Ooh, that's a fancy way of saying it. I love that. And I never knew what that word meant for a long time. It means I think I'm always right. Not just about my life, but really about your life. Just ask me and I'll tell you how to manage your life. Greed is another big one for me. The potential of greed. Do this to get this. That is a red flag danger for me. Ego. Oh boy, you can get a long way just patting my ego. I'm telling you, I have to really, really be careful about that. You can get me to do a lot of things with ego, but don't try it here, okay? Impatience. Typically, I like to think I'm pretty patient in many ways, but when it comes to electronics, that's gone. That is absolutely out the window. I have no patience. I don't think like a phone. I don't think like a computer. And I know I'm doing all the right things, and then Kent will just simply say, have you tried to turn it off and turn it back on, or unplug it? And you know, it's funny how that works most of the time. But I'm impatient just in a flash. Petty. Oh, God, I hate that about me. I can be so petty. I'll give you $50, but if you still owe me 17 cents, I'm on it. You know, I can't let that go. I just hate that pettiness about myself. Prejudice and judgmental, prejudging. I don't even know you. I haven't even met you. I don't even know your name yet. And I'm judging you. And again, this is something that it bothers me so when I do that. This has not left. This is still in my world. Comparing myself. Mike talked about that a little bit. Comparing myself to you. Oh, she's this, she's that. And again, I love when Clancy used to talk about when we do things like that, we're comparing our insides to their outsides. And when I heard him first say that, it was like, okay, that explains it, why I'm always coming up short. And then at this conference, many years ago, the wonderful late Charlie Parker was on step 10. And Claire used to bring the CDs back when I wasn't here, and so I would listen to those, and I'd hear hours, and usually get that one ballpark nugget. And this was the one. He had said that his wife Katie told him he was a story stealer. And I thought, oh, and he described what that was like. And he said, a story stealer? What do you mean? And I'm just going to make up a story equivalent to what he said. Well, remember when we were with Bob the other day, and Bob was saying, we went on our anniversary to the Cattlemen's Club for dinner. You jumped in and said, the Cattlemen's Club, oh my God. We were there, what was it, Katie, the other night, Wednesday, and I had a 10-ounce steak and a baked potato. And oh, by the way, have you ever been down to the livery stable for their steaks? She said, you took his story, stole it, and made it your own. And my heart, when he gave that analogy, went thud. How many times have I been a story stealer? All under the guise of wanting to relate to you, wanting to connect to you, wanting to show you I have been to the dinner or the city or the experience before, wanting to look good in your eyes, ego-wise, stealing your story. And so I put this list together. Now, these aren't all my defects of character, but all that we'll have time for today, okay? So, when I read the 12 and 12, I know we're asked that we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. This is the step that separates the men from the boys, or the adult from the child, the grown-up from the juvenile in my life. And when I was 6 going on to 7 and doing this inventory again, I was so ready to start growing up. And this is what I saw in 6 and 7. These were my growing up steps. I love that they're right smack dab in the middle. There were 5 steps before and 5 after. And 6 and 7 are smack in the middle. And I was so ready to grow up. Needed to, wanted to, just didn't know how to. And I felt there's got to be something I want to do. I feel like I need to put some action in here, but I never really heard anybody talk about it. And in step 6, 12 and 12, it says, if we ask, God will certainly forgive our derelictions, but in no case does he render us white as snow and keep us that way without our cooperation. That to me means I need to participate in this. I can't just say, oh, I guess God didn't remove that today. No, I didn't pause. And you know, one thing about Al-Anon, they have the best acronyms. And I got this from Al-Anon, the pause. And I've been wanting to hear a good acronym for pause, because that line down the middle between 6 and 7 for me is pause. If I pause, God has a moment to move in and to take over. And pause, their acronym is postpone action until serenity emerges. Because when I don't pause, I'm reacting, I'm not responding. And my reactions are always emotionally based. And that doesn't mean they're in a good emotion like love and kindness and warmth and spirituality. It's usually ego, fear, greed. I'm not going to get. So I learned that if I can pause when any of these are activated, I have a much better shot at not owing any amends later on. And it goes on to say that is something we're supposed to work toward ourselves. He asks only that we try as best as we know how to make progress in the building of character And that's so much what I get out of step 7 is how we build character. And for me, that was, okay, if these are my list of objectionables, am I ready to let these go? Absolutely. Do I want to keep them and keep harming people with them? No, of course not. But what does my cooperation look like? For me, it's step 7 in the action of the contrary action. So I started to move in that direction. I had to write down on that step 7 list, across from the defect, what do I think is the contrary action? This is my cooperation, my participation in this, in the building of character. And self-righteousness, shut up. Just shut up, Deb. Do not say anything. Be quiet. And that's really hard when you know you're right and you've got so much to say and you really know the right thing. And yet I am so grateful because time would only in a short way reveal, had I have said X, how wrong I would have been. I had that happen enough times that I got sick of making amends because I acted without the small piece of pie of knowledge I had that I took for truth. But I really didn't know the whole picture. And it wasn't mine to know. It wasn't my business to act on. So I've learned, just shut up. Just shut up. And that has kept me from making lots of amends. The greed thing of making cautiouser decisions and having to give more forethought than the immediate glitterazzi, because that can catch my attention, as you can imagine. Ego. Know when it is being lit up, but my ego is also so sensitive, it can be smashed down and hurt. My feelings can be hurt so easily by a slight comment, by a look, by a gesture that wasn't even personal, but I took it personal, and I'm going to punish them. I'm not going to talk to them anymore. I'm not going to sit by them anymore. I'm not going to give them the big huggy nods anymore, right? I'm going to punish them. I'm the one who gets punished by that kind of juvenile behavior. But ego, I have to really watch out for. The impatience, again, pause. Just take a breath, walk away, go do something else, and come back. And it often looks different. The solution gets solved. Something has intuitively come into my thoughts to do. I call Kent, come fix it. Those kinds of things. I have a solution. Petty. The pettiness. Let it go. Let it go, Deb. Let it go. Just give it to the universe. Whatever, the 17th sense is not going to make or break your day. Just let it go. Judgmental. Prejudging someone. I have to create a new story for them. Because the one that's going up here is never good, never puts them in upper echelons. It always makes me better than them in some way. Put a new story to them that they are just some amazing people that you need to get to know, instead of judging them for how they sound or how they look or how they behave, how they talk. Trying to put that new story together so that one I'm making up, which has no frame of reference, no facts, no experience, can be set aside. The comparing. I've learned to appreciate. You showed me how to start appreciating people for what they are and what they've done, instead of, gee, I'm not this and I'm not that and there's so much this, there's so much that. To stop the comparing, because there is no scale God has. The comparing for me is simply just nothing but taking, discrediting. Matthew talked about judging that person, they just become one-dimensional little bugs. And that comparison is really not advantageous to me or to you. And the story stealing, instead of stealing it, enhance it. Oh, so what did you have at dinner? How many years have you been married? What else did you do? Instead of taking and stealing that story. Trust me, there are so many times I have to stop myself to grab your story and add to it with my own, that I miss out on your story. And I know a lot of times after this talk, I always hear people talk about their own story stealing stories and how they are very guilty of that. I get that. But when he said that, I just went thud in my heart. I thought, what would that corrective action be? So if I paused on that line from defect into contrary action, this has helped me build some character. I didn't know how you did that. And it's by the taking of the steps. Next, we're going into our amends, but by the taking of these steps, I'm beginning to develop character. And then we have that absolutely beautiful prayer in step 7. For a long time, I never really saw what it completely said. I saw part of it, and then I'd see more, and then I'd see more. So that prayer says, when ready, we say something like this. This is what I saw. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every defective character, period. Because I want them all gone. I want to be wonderful and perfect and spiritual beyond belief. That's not going to happen. Then I read it a little bit more. I pray that you now remove from me every single defective character. And again, I didn't see the rest of it for quite a while, where it says, this is the purpose that I'm asking. This is why I stay step 3 and step 7 in the mornings. It's a 1-2 punch about get me out of the way. I pray that you now remove from me every single defective character for this purpose, which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. That's really why I'm here, is to hopefully be useful to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We've then completed step 7. I remember an experience, I was probably about 12 or 13 years sober. I was in my old home group at the Bellflower Big Book group. And we were meeting in the women's club at this time. And at the time, there were 5 sections. There was 2 in the front, an aisleway, 2 in the back, and one we called section 5, or the half measures section. You could see the speaker, but you wouldn't catch alcoholism back there. It was a safe place to be when you were new. And one night, this secretary had asked this gal to share 10 minutes. And so she was one of the 10-minute speakers. And she talked about how when she and her husband came to the meeting room that night, and he was the alcoholic, of course. They were mirrors of each other. They were both alcoholic, but he was the alcoholic. I'm just here to support him to be here, right? And she said there were 2 speakers that night. And, of course, they're in the inventory section, inventory point. And the first person got up, and she was all coiffed and, had her makeup on in the right places and spoke nicely and all that kind of stuff. And she's sitting in back there saying, God, I could never be like that. And the next guy got up. He's got long hair, torn out jeans, looks like a leftover from the 70s. And he's got an F-bomb every fifth word and all this. And she says, wow, I really related to that guy. I'm sitting there in the row listening to her share her story of her first AA meeting, judging. I'm judging the fact that if I'd have been sitting there, I would have applauded the first person. That's appropriate in my judgment. But the second guy, I would have said, Jesus, it's not the 70s anymore. Why don't you cut your hair and put some decent clothes on and clean up your language? It's not the bars anymore. And yet God used what I perceived was that man's defects as the golden glove that reached out to her and pulled her into Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's my reminder, I don't know who your messenger will be, what they're going to look like, what they're going to say that's going to make you stop and think, hey, maybe I'll give this a whirl. I don't know who that's going to be or what they're going to look like, but it sure straightened me out as to deciding who was the message carriers and who were not. I know there was another time where we had a unique situation one night at Bellflower. We had a well-known speaker who was in town, and we have timers, just like here. We have timers so that people don't go too long. Although I've made a deal with Karen, that she's not going to time me. So the guy gets up and he says, I've talked all over the world and all this. Now, he's not impressing anybody in that room. There's a lot of people in that particular room who talk all over the place, so he's not impressing anybody there. And he says, I have never been told to stop at a certain time. And we all laugh and think it's funny because you will be told when to stop here, And he says, so that's about all I've got to say, and sat down. There was an interesting silence in the room. And so, thank goodness the chairperson had the presence of mind, and he came out because there was a stage that people sat on, and the chairperson sat behind a curtain so that they didn't have to get up and down and up and down. And so he comes around, he looks back at the founder of the group and says, participation. And he says, yeah. So he starts calling on people. And I thought, well, this is interesting. And so the last guy he calls on was one of these, oh, no, not him. Oh, Jesus. If you looked up serial killer, his picture would be right next to it. No, not that guy. But I'm sitting in the front row, yes, okay. Thank goodness there is not a crawl that goes across my forehead that you can see what I'm thinking. Thank God. And he got up there, and one more time, the message of Alcoholics Anonymous was strongly carried to me by the most unlikely person. And he got up there, and he kind of was the one to break the ice. He said, well, I've never been in a meeting where the speaker was done in 5 minutes. And we all kind of did that nervous laugh, right? And he says, but I looked out in this room. He says, there's a room full of stories. There's a room full of speakers here. And I thought, you're absolutely right. I would have missed that moment with my judgment because there's a room full here of stories to be shared and passed on and experiences you've had I'll never have, that you have shared with me, I've been able to share with you. We've given each other our stories, our time, our experience. And I could have missed that by my judgment. And so in the building of character, while I know these things for me will always be just under the surface, they don't have to be as frequent, they don't have to last as long, they don't have to be as destructive, as long as I continue to ask God for that help and strength to keep passing this message on, to do what I know I can do, which is help that woman alcoholic who reaches out for help. These 2 steps to me are a constant. These aren't a one and done. These are as alive today in my life as my prayer and meditation time. Because I will always have these things just flushing below the surface. And when they rise up, I want to have that pause feature in place that Step 11 talks to us about. And so that we can get on to the next event, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. We've got a little extra time for whatever you want to do. And I want to say thank you again for my allowing me to participate in Stateline this year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Debbie. We will now close with the Lord's Prayer. Please stand and hold hands. Please end the prayer simply with the word Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Today, our daily bread, forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.